At Seagate, we're here to store the world's data, and we follow the data. Today's conversation is an exciting one for me to discuss where and how data is moving through the data sphere. We're going to talk about GenAI. We're going to talk about the effects it's having on data, the volume of data that it's creating, the complexity and the richness of the data sets, and of course, the value of data, the most important thing. Just as important, what does content creation in the era of GenAI mean for enterprise strategy? This is one of the questions that we think about at Seagate all the time, and we asked our colleagues at IDC to help us investigate this with a survey. To discuss these findings, I'm here today with Adam Wright, the manager of research from the international market research firm IDC. Adam, can you tell us a little bit about the research that you've completed to get this insight?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So the study surveyed around 1,000 businesses and IT decision makers, and that was worldwide from large and mid-size organizations across industries that are using or currently using Gen AI tools. Gen AI has fueled a proliferation of new content and richer content, and it's really driving that data growth at an unprecedented speed. And so this IDC study reveals how GenAI is reshaping that enterprise content. What we learned is that we're at an inflection point, right? GenAI is expanding content volumes, it's enhancing the richness of that content, and it's enhancing the value density at a pace that we haven't seen before. So what used to take teams days or weeks now happens in a few seconds or a few minutes. And every output now has potential new storage consequences. IDC projects that the creation of 213,557 exabytes of data globally in 2025, and that's more than doubling to 527,469 exabytes generated worldwide in 2029. A single exabyte equals 1 million terabytes, or 1 billion gigabytes. GenAI has really emerged as that key accelerator of digital content creation. It's a type of AI that can create new content, such as text or images, music, video, or even code, by learning from existing data. So GenAI uses models to generate outputs that are similar to the data it was trained on, enabling it to produce new content. So in just 2 years, GenAI has moved from being a very nascent technology to becoming a widely used tool, and increasingly more so as time goes on.
That's incredible, Adam. I mean, it's just so rapid, the adoption and the acceleration of Gen AI into so many different use cases and so many new applications. I think it'd be good if we start to talk a little bit about the findings at a deeper level in terms of like, what specifically is Gen AI doing for content creation at the application layer? I think the fact that stood out to me from the report, around 78% of enterprises now creating content that didn't exist before Gen AI, is just absolutely mind-blowing at the rate and the volume of content creation that we're now going to see moving forward. As you thought about this during the study, what was most maybe exciting or disruptive to you as some of those facts came out?
Yeah, I think that it was really exciting to see how fast Gen AI was allowing teams, whether they're marketing teams or product development teams or even internal teams working on creating training videos, other text summaries of meetings and so forth. The Gen AI is really allowing folks to make content at such a rapid pace that they wouldn't have been able to before because of time constraints or budget constraints or skills shortages, or maybe that content creation was designated to be created by a specific production team of some sort. So I think Gen AI is a pretty profound technology that's enabling more people to create more content at a faster rate. It's very exciting.
Yeah, that's great. I see a lot here at Seagate where, our teams have changed from text-based conversations to video-based conversations. We're getting more immersive content. We're able to communicate globally. Most of these large enterprises are global companies. And so we're able now with application development to speak in native languages and create content that is able to be absorbed and understood faster than ever before, which is super exciting. And I also like that you've captured that many organizations, marketing and engineering and operations and finance and IT, are all able to be part of this new application development, whereas before maybe some of the technology curves were focused on a specific area of expertise. This is really democratizing that content creation and that volume of information. And I think what's really cool to me, building on what we were just discussing, is that the other stats that are pretty mind-blowing is 66% of the enterprises that were studied here report major increases in file counts. So we have to start to think about the infrastructure that's going to support this. We're now creating big plethora of new content that has to be understood, it has to be organized, and it has to be consumed in a different way. How have you thought about, the consumption and distribution of video with respect to what you heard from these key experts?
Yeah, I think that video production is really going to be transformed by GenAI platforms and tools, right? You're able to create many more files and many more iterations of the original file and customize it or personalize it to different target audiences in different languages, different regions. It allows you to also reduce the need for reshooting raw video formats and make it a lot more of an efficient process at the end of the day in that whole production process. When enterprises are reporting that major increase in file counts, it's not just the ability to increase the final output, but it's also the additional files and images and text and code that's created along the production cycle up to that final output. So, many iterations of trying to refine that video output, for example, or many iterations and clippings trying to refine text outputs or image outputs, and all of that digital content creation has to go somewhere, right? So it's really increasing not just the final output in file counts, but also those production files along the way to that final output.
Yeah, super cool. I think the barrier to entry being lower has allowed so many more people to participate in this. And like you said, I think because of that, people are trying, they're iterating more, they're creating those copies along the way as they refine, rescope, create new learning, bring things into the forefront of what they're doing on a daily basis. And I think that's leading to, applications that are storing duplicates around the globe, and you're having people that are activating things in one geo versus another, and then now the tools can bring all of that information together and create a higher level of insight. How do you think that enterprises are going to deal with some of that variation in content and that duplicative nature of how content's being created?
Enterprises are going to need to reevaluate their storage practices. They're going to have to rethink about which type of data is valuable to them now, and maybe new types of data become valuable along this production process using GenAI. Maybe it can enable new insights or be used for training or inferencing. So I think that you're going to have an interesting period where enterprises will need to adjust. There may be a deluge of data that's being created across different lines of business, and not all lines of business are created equal. Some may find a reductive effect in some scenarios, but overall, I think being able to manage that surge in content is going to be a real challenge for a lot of enterprises, not just from the compute side, but from the storage side as well.
Yeah, truly an exciting time in the application space where AI and Gen AI is going to embed into so many different use cases. I think the sheer volume of data that we're looking to generate is going to be exemplary in terms of what we're going to benefit from in the future as we analyze all this new information.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's not just more content that's being created, it's the gravity around each of those individual content files or taken together as a group, right? That content is becoming heavier, it's becoming richer, and it's becoming harder to manage.
Yeah, just a simple example, right? I mean, you go from 720p to 1080 to 4K to 8K, the scale at which the data is going to grow on the different platforms, whether it be in richer video, richer photo content, the ability to interact between each of those modalities, between text to photo, text to video. It truly creates a kind of a gravity to the application and a strength and a power of the application that makes it, you know, far more exciting to be a part of versus, just we're also used to just sitting on our laptops for the last few years and interacting with one another in a pretty common way that most of us are used to. Quite disruptive and quite exciting to see new ways to interact with people around the world and do business in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's a challenge for organizations that need to balance that sort of limitless creation with disciplined lifecycle management, right? And I think that to date, since that technology and deployments of GenAI are so new and so nascent and so recent, most enterprises aren't yet. They're not comfortable or have a clear vision on what to do with that influx of data that's coming through their systems. And I think that the volume wave is hitting faster than governance has evolved. So I think that's a sort of a critical inflection point that's coming around the corner.
Policy is very key. The implementation of policy as we speak to our customers and as we saw through your report, it is a common challenge that many are tackling, making sure they've got adherence to where data is created, where data is pulled from, how they're looking at that information and being respectful of those boundaries, whether it be on IP or governance or compliance. It creates a new space that, at face value could be quite complicated, but luckily, the tools are addressing this from the beginning to ensure that all enterprises are able to be in this space safely, operating with clear guardrails to where data is going to be and how data is going to move, which I think was very much needed in order to drive that additional adoption across more enterprises. So super exciting, but yeah, I think the point you hit on of governance is going to be an evolving landscape that we're going to have to pay careful attention to as these applications mature.
Absolutely. So, of course, all these volumes of rich data have implications for storage, right?
Adam, absolutely. There is no AI without data, and there is no data without storage. I think this is the most exciting part of this landscape that we're in. From the cloud customers that we interact with on a daily basis, we see the scale. We see that mass capacity, hard drives, they are the anchor that allow AI to have persistent data. They provide durability, they have throughput requirements, and they have the economics that allow and keep that intelligence to be sustainable. So now, as you think about it, Adam, what do you see from enterprises and how they view storage? Is it still an infrastructure layer to them, or are they starting to finally see that this layer is critical and it determines whether or not AI's speed and success will be achieved?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Likely too often, I think it's being seen as infrastructure, a bit of an afterthought, a bit of a downstream afterthought, if you will. But as those models are scaling, I think the realization hits, right, that data architecture is performance architecture.
Makes sense. We see this a lot too. The value is lagging in terms of, first and foremost, not in the models. There's tons of innovation in the models, there's tons of innovation in the capability, but the infrastructure to support the model is a hurry up and get ready. We need that readiness, we need that governance, we need that overall capability to serve the models and to serve the content and allow it to be consumed at scale.
Yeah, absolutely. Gen AI is certainly sparking that demand for more and longer content retention, right? Our results found that about 34% of respondents say their storage infrastructure is fully optimized for Gen AI, while 38% are only partially prepared. So I think that paints a pretty clear picture at the moment that as Gen AI has burst onto the scene in the past 12 to 18 months, and enterprises are starting to run pilots and figure out what they can do with Gen AI, I think that there's a lot of focus right now on what Gen AI can do, but what's less focused on is what needs to be done to support those AI models in terms of producing better outputs and then what to do with those outputs once they're produced. So I think that preparedness is a major issue right now for sure.
We see that in spades. I think it's very clear that enterprises are trying to catch up now that they've had successful POCs and are starting to deploy. All of the companies that create this hardware infrastructure and deploy this at scale for them are rapidly trying to meet this need and rapidly trying to get volumes of hardware deployed to keep up now with this content creation. And it's really a point where software and hardware are starting to come together again, an innovation cycle that is long overdue and now rapidly changing and rapidly evolving to keep up. Super exciting. The one that got me was as I looked through the statistics from your work, which was phenomenal, like 66% of respondents expect moderate or significant storage growth over the next 2 years just due to GenAI. Most exciting as part of the data storage ecosystem and as part of the layer that is creating and retaining all of that information on hard drives. I think it's so exciting to see so many companies value data and really expect to be driving more data in their possession to create better insight for their enterprise.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also about unlocking sort of latent value and identifying new value. And Gen AI is able to help with that in a lot of ways, right? Not only is Gen AI producing the output, but it's also being used as a tool to make sense of unstructured data and to help with metadata and tagging and helping to be a tool of data organization in of itself, right? And so I think that as more content is being created at a faster rate, I think that enterprises are very quickly going to realize that they need to be able to make sense of that data and they need to organize that data in a better way in order to make sense of it. And I think that you have a increasing demand on all storage tiers, and especially the HDD. HDD is not a place where you can just park that data, but it's actually a vibrant place that supports all of the other benefits and outputs along the way. So I think that enterprises are going to need to start thinking about as those content volumes are increasing, they need to figure out a way to make sense of that content. And at the end of the day, turn that content into business value.
You nailed it. I love the comment about unstructured data. We see that rapidly growing. And with that, it creates an opportunity for architecture to solve new challenges. 42% are planning the need to retain data longer by implementing data tiering and archiving strategies. We need to make sure the data you're accessing rapidly is available to you. But at the same time, we need to make sure the content that you've created in the past is also visible and available. That cohesive, cost-effective, scalable data tiering architecture is going to be fundamental as AI continues to explode and as generative AI tries to extract additional insight and value out of the data.
So I think the next storage wave will come from those richer formats, as well as hybrid retention models, right? And I think that enterprises that can prepare scalable and cost-efficient architectures now will be the ones that lead in AI-driven value capture in the coming years.
Totally agree. I think it becomes a competitive advantage. I think it becomes a differentiator in how you serve your customers. It's going to be something that adds an additional layer of customer satisfaction because enterprises that are able to manage all of this content and manage larger growing volumes of data and richer content, it's not only going to be good for the customer, it's going to be a better experience for the workforce too. People are going to want to be a part of that ecosystem to really be a value added stream to the application that's being developed. What is unique to me and what I'm excited about is, Gen AI is not just producing more data, it's creating that value across multiple chains of the organization as well as the customer lifecycle.
And so that life cycle is less linear as Gen AI deployments continue to proliferate and become more embedded in enterprise systems and structures and workflows. So what you end up with is a much more dynamic data lifecycle than before.
The winners of this Gen AI explosion are going to start to treat storage not just as capacity to hold information, but capability to really generate value.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So, Jason, if you were advising a CIO right now, what do you think would be the single most critical move?
Well, as we've been talking about this whole time, I think we better get ready for scale. We know that the volume of content is coming, and we better have an infrastructure and a strategy and a policy that aligns to that content creation explosion that's about to happen, and make sure that our company can run and organize and operate and optimize on that volume of data. And I think the other piece that we want to make sure people are mindful of is we don't want people off just chasing AI features. We want to make sure that they're solidifying their data foundation. Data is what's going to bring them value moving forward. And innovation around that data is going to be unsuccessful if it isn't durable, if it isn't accessible, and it isn't cost effective so that the business can continue to thrive for years to come.
So, with all this research in mind, IDC has five sort of crucial recommendations, I think, for readers to take away from this core piece of research. What's really important is to plan now for those Gen AI driven data growth moments that are about to happen. It's not always happening in a linear motion. It can cycle up and it can cycle down, and that can really catch enterprises and decision makers off guard, right? So I think part of that is the need to adopt tiered, scalable storage architectures that are anchored in high capacity HDDs.
Yeah, in addition to that, Adam, I think it's very important to think about and redefine what it means to be performant. In the past, in historical architectures, it was very much siloed. We had fast applications, we had large applications, we had infrastructure that supported fast applications and large applications. Now we need to start to think more holistically. We need to redefine that performance to focus on all of those metrics: throughput, the endurance of writing, and how often you're putting information into that infrastructure, and the scale at which that infrastructure can consume and reserve that information. There's no single metric like latency that's going to solve all of your challenges. We need to, again, look holistically at the problem and make sure your storage infrastructure supports what business and what applications you're trying to run.
Another core recommendation that surfaced through this research is that enterprises really need to strengthen their data governance and retention policies early, right? Get ahead of it now rather than waiting. I think that some AI generated content will carry more of a long-term business and compliance value. And I think that enterprises really need to start planning and setting their sights further down to get ahead of that when they can.
Makes total sense. And I think about scale a lot as well. There are multiple use cases in which enterprises are going to be successful. There is the large public cloud where you can get elasticity, you can create that experience and that onboarding of development time, capabilities, and scale and burst and create this effective global collaboration. But in addition to that, you also need to think about what data are you creating that's really valuable to your business. Should you own that? Should you create a strategy that's efficiently combined between edge deployment and cloud deployment to get the best of both worlds, both the IP ownership, the data proximity, the ability to meet those governance and retention policies that you need, as well as get the benefits of the scale from a public cloud model?
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are good points. And sort of when you take all that together too, there's another element that I think enterprises need to be aware of now because it can take time to really address, which is this idea that you need to really be preparing your teams and your workers for the AI-driven content workflows, right? I think that we need to be starting to train employees to both understand Gen AI content creation and create content more efficiently and be skilled to be able to do that. And I think that there's also the cost performance implications of data storage as well. And decision makers across lines of business and even the C-suite need to start getting on board with the idea of what does that look like and how to implement it.
Yeah, so up to this point, the focus has been on speed because the competitive advantage is get the time to market, get the application out there, move as fast as you can to be the leader in a new space. But rapidly, we will see that the next competitive edge coming isn't going to be how fast you generate, but it's going to be how intelligently you retain. AI is going to reward those who treat the data architecture as part of the strategy, not just part of the infrastructure. Ultimately, AI is only as powerful as the data foundation that's underneath it. The question for enterprise leaders isn't how much data that you have, it's how ready your storage is to turn that data into lasting value. This is something that I think really needs to be a call to action and at the forefront of all decision makers in the enterprise moving forward. Don't you think, Adam?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think that that readiness starts today, right? It has to, because Gen AI doesn't just create content, it's reshaping how enterprises create, store, and ultimately compete.
Adam, it was a pleasure spending time with you today. Really enjoyed our conversation. Great getting to know you through this research and really value all of the great work that you and your team did for the industry.
Likewise, thanks, mate. Certainly was a very eye-opening and exciting project and a timely one as that. Yeah, I very much enjoyed working alongside you all.
Thanks.